Hello and welcome. There is nothing you need to do now, nothing you need to solve or think about or remember. The day is done. It has been put away, and all that is left is this quiet space here in the soft darkness. So let us begin, not with a story, but with a simple settling and arrival. Go ahead and find for yourself a position of complete and total comfort. Allow yourself to adjust, to shift until your body sends a quiet signal of contentment. Feel the weight of your head resting upon the pillow, a gentle, welcome heaviness. Feel the way your shoulders can now release, letting go of whatever they have been carrying for you throughout the day. Sense the long, elegant length of your spine, supported completely by the surface beneath you. Whether it is a bed, soft and yielding, or a favorite old sofa that knows you so well, there is no effort required now. You are held. You are supported. Now, bring your awareness to the blanket or the sheet that covers you. Feel its gentle weight, a whisper-light pressure against your skin. It is a soft armor against the world, a cocoon of quiet and warmth. Notice the texture of the fabric, the way it drapes and folds around you, creating a small, personal haven just for you. In this space, you are perfectly safe. You are perfectly warm. The world outside, with all its noise and all its hurry, can simply fade away. Let those sounds become distant, like the echo of a wave on a shore you have long since left behind. They are there, but they are no longer your concern. They cannot touch you here. And now, let's take a breath together. A slow, easy breath in through the nose, filling your lungs with the calm night air. And then a long, slow, quiet sigh out through the mouth. A release. Let's do that once more. A deep, comfortable breath in, and a full, complete breath out, letting the last remnants of the day drift away with it. With that breath, feel the tiny muscles in your face begin to soften. Let the space between your eyebrows widen. Allow your jaw to unclench, to hang loose and heavy. Every point of tension, from your forehead to your toes, is now being given permission to dissolve, to melt away like a snowflake on a warm hand. Imagine that tension as a tightly wound knot, and with every slow breath you take, the knot gently, slowly begins to unravel, strand by strand, until there is nothing left but ease, nothing left but stillness. You are sinking now, comfortably, peacefully, into a state of deep and profound rest. As your body finds its well-deserved rest, sinking deeper into a state of quiet comfort, Allow your mind the freedom to drift. Let it become untethered from the anchors of the day. Imagine it as a single, weightless seed from a milkweed pod, caught in a gentle, unseen thermal, rising and turning in the warm night air. It has no destination, no agenda. It is simply floating, observing, and feeling the currents of this deep and profound stillness. In this quiet, have you ever found yourself wondering about the things that time has misplaced? Not just lost, like a misplaced key, but truly forgotten. The things that have slipped through the fine meshed net of memory, dissolving into the silent dust of centuries. I'm not speaking of the great loud events that fill our history books, the stories carved in stone and shouted from the rooftops. Not the clash of armies, their armor glinting under a harsh sun, or the coronations of powerful kings, their crowns heavy with jewels and responsibility. Those are the stories told over and over, their edges worn smooth by 1,000 tellings. Instead, let your thoughts drift towards the quieter things, the softer stories, the ones that were never meant to be recorded. Think for a moment of a simple melody, a little folk tune, perhaps, that a mother once hummed to her child by the warmth of a hearth fire. A melody sung in a voice that was not famous, but was full of love. A lullaby that held the entire history of a family in its simple, repeating notes. A tune that was known by an entire village, hummed by farmers in the field and fishermen on the sea, but which now is gone forever, its notes scattered into the silent air like motes of dust in a sunbeam. Or think of a city that once pulsed with a life as real and as vibrant as your own, a city where the morning light slanted across narrow alleyways, where the air carried the scent of baking bread and strange, exotic spices from its bustling market. A city filled with the low murmur of conversation, the distant laughter of children playing a game with rules now lost to time, the rhythmic tap, tap, tap of an artisan's hammer. A city that is now nothing more than a rumor, a whisper in an ancient text, its grand buildings and humble homes returned to the earth or to the sea, leaving not even a shadow behind. History, you see, is very much like a clear night sky. Our eyes, by their very nature, are drawn to the brightest stars, the Caesars, the Cleopatras, the Alexanders. We connect them, drawing familiar lines between them to form constellations, recognizable shapes that we use to navigate the vast, dark expanse of the past. But in focusing on those brilliant points of light, we so often forget about the space between them. The vast, deep, velvet darkness that holds everything. That darkness is not empty. It is the opposite of empty. It is full. It is full of the forgotten lullabies, the lost cities, the unwritten stories. It is full of the quiet hopes and private sorrows of millions upon millions of souls. It is a silent ocean of what ifs and might have beens, and tonight we will simply float upon its surface and listen to its whispers. And so tonight, as we float here together on this silent, starlit ocean of what has been, we are going to journey toward one of its oldest and most persistent whispers. It is a sound that is less a word and more a feeling, a distant echo that has traveled through millennia to reach us here in this quiet room. It is a whisper that has haunted the edges of our maps and the deepest corners of our collective dreams. This is not a story of wars or of empires in the way we usually think of them, but of something far more elusive, far more fragile. It is a story of an island, a story of a city, a story of a memory that feels almost real. It is the story of a beautiful, tragic dream, and the name of that dream, a name that feels ancient on the tongue, is Atlantis. Now, as we begin this gentle journey, I want to give you a simple invitation. It is an invitation to let go. Let go of any need to find a definitive answer. Let go of any impulse to piece together the clues or to remember the names and the dates. There will be no test at the end of this story. That is not the purpose of our time together tonight. The purpose is simply to drift. The purpose is to wonder. I want you to think of this story not as a lesson, but as a lullaby. A long, meandering river of words designed to soothe your mind, to unburden it, and to carry you gently and safely towards the deep, peaceful delta of sleep. Allow the words to simply wash over you like a slow, warm tide upon a quiet shore. There is no need to hold on to them. If a particular image or idea captures your imagination for a moment, you can float with it, exploring it in the gentle currents of your own mind. And if you find that my voice begins to fade into the background, or that your mind begins to wander away from the story entirely, that is perfectly fine. In fact, it is a wonderful sign. It means you are succeeding. It means the vigilant guard of your conscious mind is beginning to lower its post, and your body is claiming the rest it so deeply deserves. This story is merely a vessel, a small, sturdy boat designed to carry you from the awareness of this room to the vast and beautiful landscape of your own inner world. It is a bridge between the waking world and the world of dreams. And perhaps somewhere along that bridge, you will find a quiet place to lay down your thoughts and drift off completely. That would be the most wonderful destination of all. And if you find that you enjoy these quiet journeys into the hazy corners of the past, if this kind of gentle storytelling brings you a sense of comfort and a measure of peace, then perhaps you will want to return to this space on other nights. We will always be here, in the quiet, waiting with another story to tell. But that is a thought for another time, a thought for a distant tomorrow. For now, the only thing left to do is to let go completely. If you haven't already, allow your eyes to close. Feel the gentle darkness behind your eyelids, a soft velvet curtain descending on the day, and let our story begin. Let us drift back now. Together, let us allow our awareness to unmoor itself from the present moment, from this room, from this bed. Let it become light, like smoke, and travel backward through time, not just years or even centuries, but millennia. We are drifting back to a quiet evening in a city of white stone and legendary thought, a city called Athens, more than 2,400 years ago. The first thing you might notice is the quality of the quiet. It is a quiet deeper and more profound than any we know today. There is no steady, low hum of electricity in the walls, no distant drone of traffic on a faraway highway. The city is settling, and as it settles, it breathes. The sun-baked marble of the temples and the packed earth of the streets are beginning to exhale the day's warmth, releasing it into the cooling air. The sky above is not polluted by the orange glow of a million electric lights, but is instead a canvas of deep, dark, velvety indigo, so clear that the stars seem close enough to touch. Now, bring your attention to where you are. You are not in a grand temple or a bustling public square. You are inside a simple, private home. A room. The walls are made of plaster, painted a soft, chalky white. And in this room, there is a gentle, living light. It does not come from a bulb, but from a small terracotta lamp, a simple clay vessel filled with golden olive oil. A single wick floats in the oil, and from it, a small teardrop-shaped flame flickers and sways. It is a soft, honeyed glow, a light that seems to have a warmth and a life all its own. It does not flood the room with harsh brightness, but rather it pushes the darkness back into the corners, creating long, soft-edged shadows that dance and shift with every gentle draft. These shadows move as if they are part of the conversation, leaning in to listen, then retreating into the quiet corners of the room. And there is a scent in the air. It is a complex and ancient smell. There is the clean, slightly nutty aroma of the burning olive oil from the lamp. Beneath that, there is the faint, earthy smell of the clay walls and the stone floor. And drifting in from an open doorway, you can catch the fragrance of the Athenian night. The dry, herbal scent of wild thyme and oregano from the nearby hillsides. And perhaps, if the wind is just right, a subtle, salty tang from the not-so-distant Aegean Sea. It is the smell of a world made of earth and stone and sea. Listen now. Listen past my voice. Can you hear the sounds of the room? It is not silent. There is the faintest sputtering and hissing from the lamp's flame, a tiny, constant sound. From outside, in the warm darkness, comes the rhythmic, hypnotic chirping of crickets, a sound that has been the lullaby of the Mediterranean for countless ages. And within the room itself, there is the sound of voices, not loud, not argumentative. A small group of men are gathered here, some reclining on simple couches, others seated on sturdy wooden chairs, their surfaces worn smooth by years and years of use. Their voices are calm, measured. There is a rhythm to their speech, a gentle rising and falling, like a quiet tide. They are not talking about the business of the day or the gossip of the city. They are talking about ideas, big, slow, wandering ideas, the nature of the soul, the design of a perfect society, the meaning of justice. The words themselves are not as important as the sound they create, a low, continuous murmur that fills the room with a sense of peaceful contemplation. You are here, in this room, as a silent, unseen guest. You are simply observing, simply feeling the soft, warm air on your skin, feeling the solidness of the simple chair beneath you. There is nothing here to distract you, nothing to pull your attention away, no screens to glow, no notifications to chime. There is only the flickering golden light, the scent of olive and earth, and the gentle, rolling cadence of a philosophical conversation. This is a moment suspended in time, a timeless tableau of human beings gathered in the quiet of the night to do one of the simplest and most profound of things: to think, to wonder, to be, and to tell a story. And now, let your focus drift toward one particular man in this quiet, lamp-lit room. He is the one who seems to be the gentle center of this gathering, the calm axis around which the conversation turns. He is older now, perhaps in his later years, and he carries the quiet authority, not of a ruler, but of a teacher who has earned the deep and abiding respect of his students. His name is Plato, but as you hear that name, I want you to let go of the image you may hold in your mind. Do not picture him as he is so often shown to us, a cold, lifeless bust of marble, with sightless eyes and a severe expression, a figure meant for a museum shelf. That is not the man in this room tonight. The man here is made of flesh and blood, of warmth and breath. Let go of the philosopher, the titan of intellect, and instead allow yourself to see the man, the storyteller. Picture him, if you will, more like a beloved grandfather, the kind whose presence alone is a comfort. The lamplight plays across the features of his face, revealing a map of a life spent in deep contemplation. His forehead is high and broad, and upon it are etched the long, horizontal lines of thought, and perhaps the fainter, crinkled lines of laughter at the corners of his eyes. And his eyes, they are not the blank orbs of a statue. They are deep set and clear, and they hold a certain kind of light. It is the light of wisdom, yes, but it is tempered with a gentle curiosity and even a spark of quiet, knowing humor. They are eyes that have observed the world with an intense and unwavering gaze for many, many years. They have seen the follies of men and the beauty of the natural world, and they seem to hold both in a state of calm acceptance. His posture is relaxed. He is not lecturing from a podium, but reclining comfortably, one elbow propped on a cushion. His hands are clasped loosely in his lap. They are the hands of a thinker and a writer, long-fingered and expressive, though they are still now. The fabric of his simple tunic, his chiton, is a plain, undyed wool, and it falls in soft folds around his frame. There is a profound stillness about him, an aura of peace that seems to emanate from him and fill the space around him. And when he speaks, his voice is not the booming instrument of an orator. It is a resonant baritone sound, calm and even, with a texture like time-worn wood. Each word is formed with care, without hurry. He is not trying to win an argument or to overwhelm his listeners with logic. He is simply sharing his thoughts, guiding the conversation as a skilled boatman guides a vessel down a slow, deep river. And now, a shift occurs in the room. The back and forth of the dialogue, the gentle parry and thrust of ideas, begins to subside. A deeper quiet settles over the gathering. The other men lean in, their attention now fully focused on him. Plato has paused, a small, thoughtful smile playing on his lips. He tells them he is about to share something different, not an argument, but a story, and an old one at that. He makes it very clear, his voice dropping a little, becoming even more intimate, almost confidential. This is not a tale of my own invention, he might say, his eyes moving from face to face in the flickering light. He explains that it is a piece of history, a genuine account of things that happened long ago. A story so ancient that it makes the Athens they know, and even the great Trojan War of the poets, seem like recent events. This story, he tells them, was passed down to him through his family. It came from a man named Critias, who heard it from his own grandfather, who in turn was told the story by one of the wisest men Athens ever produced, the great lawmaker and poet Solon. And Solon himself, Plato continues, did not witness these events. During his travels in his youth, Solon journeyed to the ancient and mysterious land of Egypt. There, in the city of Sais, within a great temple on the Nile Delta, he spoke with the priests. These priests, he explains, were the keepers of the world's oldest memories. Their temple walls covered in hieroglyphs that chronicled a history stretching back into the mists of time. far beyond the memory of the Greeks. It was they who told Solon the tale, a tale from their most sacred records, a tale of a mighty power that rose from the Atlantic Ocean and of its extraordinary fate, a whisper from a forgotten age. And so, in the warm, flickering light of that Athenian home, the voice of Plato begins to weave the tale he received from the ancient Egyptian priests. His tone shifts, becoming less of a philosopher's query and more of a historian's quiet recitation. He asks his companions to imagine a time that is almost unimaginable, a past so remote it makes their own world feel young and new, a time long, long ago. So long ago, he explains, that the great pyramids of Giza, which to them seem to have stood since the dawn of time, would have been considered a recent memory. So long ago that the very foundations of their own beloved city, Athens, had not yet been laid, its future glory nothing more than an unwritten dream. This was a time of a different world, a different geography, a different kind of power. In this ancient epic, he says, the world's map was drawn with different lines. He speaks of the sea that the Greeks knew so well, the shimmering, wine-dark Mediterranean, and he describes it as a mere lake, a familiar harbor at the edge of something far greater. For beyond it, there was the true ocean, the vast and mysterious Atlantic, an endless expanse of water that stretched to the very edges of imagination. At the mouth of their Mediterranean, there was a gateway, a place the Greeks called the Pillars of Hercules. Today, we know this place as the Strait of Gibraltar, that narrow, strategic passage of water separating the southern tip of Spain from the rugged coast of Africa. To the ancient world, this was the edge of the known map. It was a threshold between the familiar and the infinite, a place where civilization ended and myth began, a point of no return. But the Egyptian priests, with their long and patient memory, told Solon that this was not an end. It was, in fact, a beginning. For out in that great open ocean, just beyond the Pillars of Hercules, there lay an island, and not a small, wind-swept rock, but a landmass of staggering, almost inconceivable proportions. Plato's voice is steady and calm as he relays the priest's description. This island, they said, was larger in size than all of Libya and Asia combined. Now, to our modern ears, that sounds impossible, a clear exaggeration. But we must remember what those words meant to a Greek of that time. Libya was their name for the entire known continent of North Africa, from Egypt westward, and Asia referred not to the vast continent we know today, but to what we now call Asia Minor, the great rich peninsula of modern-day Turkey. So imagine it, a single vast island rising from the Atlantic, a landmass larger than North Africa and Turkey put together. It was not just a kingdom, it was an empire, a world unto itself. And this great island, Plato continues, was itself a gateway. It was the heart of a great oceanic system, a stepping stone to an even wider world. For from its many harbors, a traveler could sail to other, smaller islands, which lay scattered across the water like a string of pearls, or like the exposed vertebrae of some great, sleeping sea creature, forming a bridge of islands. And if one were to follow this chain of islands, sailing from one to the next, they would eventually arrive at their final destination. On the far side of the great ocean, opposite the known world of Europe and Africa, there lay another immense landmass, a true continent, a vast, silent land that walled in the great Atlantic Ocean containing it. Here, the story pauses for a moment, letting the sheer, breathtaking scale of this lost world sink into the quiet minds of the listeners. A super island leading to an island chain, leading to a forgotten continent. This was the world as it was, according to the sacred, time-worn records of the Egyptians. And the great island at the center of it all, the heart of this oceanic empire, it had a name that was said to have been bestowed upon it by the gods themselves. It was called Atlantis, a name derived, Plato explains, from the great god of the sea, Poseidon. For it was Poseidon who was given this island as his personal domain in the dawn of time, when the gods divided the earth amongst themselves. And it was his eldest son, a half-god, half-mortal king of immense wisdom and stature, named Atlas, who became its first ruler. And so, the island and the entire ocean surrounding it came to bear his name, the island of Atlantis and the Atlantic Ocean. But Plato finishes this part of the tale, letting the name hang in the quiet, lamp-lit air of the room. This, he stresses again, is not a poet's fancy. It is not a myth he has spun to entertain his friends. This is the account as told to Solon by the priests of Sais, a fragment of a lost history, preserved for millennia not in the fresh memory of the young Greek world, but in the stone-carved annals of the oldest civilization they knew. A memory from Egypt, a whisper of a sunken world carried across the sea and across the ages to be spoken here tonight. As Plato continues to speak, his voice paints a picture in the minds of his listeners, a picture of the capital city of Atlantis itself. He describes a city built not upon a mountain or within a valley, but one designed with a logic so perfect, so divine, that it seemed less like the work of human hands and more like a thought of the gods made manifest in stone and water. Imagine, he says, a vast and fertile plain on the main island. And at the very center of this plain, there rose a low, gentle hill. It was here that Poseidon, the god of the sea, laid the foundations for his beloved city, and its design was unlike any other city known to man. It was not a chaotic sprawl of streets, nor a rigid grid. It was a perfect, living mandala. The city was composed of concentric circles of land and water, alternating in perfect harmony, as if a giant had dropped a single sacred stone into a still pond and the ripples had been frozen in time. Picture it from above. At the very heart was a central island, the original hill. Encircling this island was a ring of pure, clear water. And encircling that ring of water was a larger ring of land, and then another ring of water, and finally a third and final ring of land. 3 rings of water and 2 rings of land, all perfectly circular, all equidistant from one another, creating a breathtaking pattern of impossible symmetry. It was a city that was also a harbor, a fortress that was also a garden. And these were not stagnant moats. Plato describes how the Atlanteans, with their advanced engineering, carved a great canal, straight and true, leading from the vastness of the open sea. This canal was wide enough and deep enough for the largest ships of the time to sail through. Imagine the sight of a graceful, white-sailed vessel gliding silently from the ocean, passing through the outermost ring of land, and entering the circular waterways of the city itself. The canal led all the way to the central harbor, the innermost ring of water, which lapped at the shores of the central island. And connecting the rings of land, there were great bridges, arching elegantly over the water, wide enough for carriages to pass. Tunnels were dug beneath the land rings, allowing smaller boats to pass from one watery circle to the next without ever disturbing the traffic above. The entire city was a masterpiece of flowing movement, a seamless blend of land and sea. On the rings of land, life flourished. There were sacred groves dedicated to the gods, filled with trees of every kind, their leaves rustling in the gentle sea breeze. There were gymnasiums and open-air race courses for both men and for horses. There were public baths, some open to the sky to catch the warm sun, others enclosed and fed by natural hot springs that bubbled up from the earth. Fountains played in sun-drenched courtyards, their water sparkling. The city was alive with the gentle sounds of a peaceful, prosperous civilization. But the most wondrous feature, the detail that would have left Plato's listeners breathless, was the description of the walls. Each of the great land rings was encircled by a massive defensive wall. But these were not plain stone. The Atlanteans, rich with the bounty of their island, coated the entire surface of these walls with metal. The outermost wall, the one that met the sea, was sheathed entirely in bronze. Imagine its immense surface, miles and miles of it, gleaming in the sunlight with a warm reddish-brown luster like the shield of a resting god. The next wall, the one that encircled the middle ring of land, was covered in a different metal. It was coated in pure, brilliant tin. This wall would have shone with a cool, silvery white light, like moonlight on calm water, a stunning contrast to the warm bronze of the outer wall. And then there was the final wall, the wall that encircled the Acropolis, the central island where the royal palace and the most sacred temples stood. This wall, the most precious of all, was covered in a metal that has been a mystery ever since. Plato says the priests called it orichalcum. He describes it as a metal that, in his time, was only a name, but was then mined in great quantities on the island. And its appearance was extraordinary. It was said to possess a fiery, reddish light, glowing with a soft, internal luminescence, as if it held a trapped sunset within it. Imagine that sight: a city of concentric rings, gleaming in bronze, then silver, and at its heart, a circle of otherworldly, fiery light. It would have been a vision of pure magic, a city that truly seemed to be divine. For many generations, Plato recounts, the people of Atlantis lived in this state of sublime harmony and grace. Their lives were a reflection of the divine nature they had inherited from their godly ancestor, Poseidon. This divine spark was strong within them, a quiet, steady flame that guided their actions and thoughts. They held true virtue in their hearts, not as a rigid set of rules, but as an effortless way of being. They were known throughout the ancient world for their gentleness, their wisdom, and their great-mindedness. They looked upon the vast, glittering wealth that surrounded them, the gleaming metals, the fertile lands, the bustling trade from all corners of their oceanic empire, not with a feverish desire, but with a calm, almost serene indifference. They understood a truth that so many others had forgotten, that these material things were fleeting, secondary to the true, enduring treasures of friendship, integrity, and inner peace. They were the kings and queens of a gilded city, but they were not slaves to its gold. Their laws were just, their society was balanced, and their lives were lived in a state of deep and resonant contentment that the rest of the world could only dream of, a distant golden age. But, Plato continues, his voice now taking on a note of deep, resonant sadness, nothing born of the mortal world can last forever. Even the strongest flame will eventually flicker, and the Atlanteans, for all their divine ancestry, were also human. And so, slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, like a shadow lengthening in the late afternoon, a change began to occur. Generation after generation, the divine portion of their souls, that golden inheritance from their godly forefather, began to grow thin. It was diluted by the mortal part of their nature again and again. You can imagine it like a single drop of pure celestial ink in a vast container of clear water. With every new birth, more water was added, and the color faded from a deep, vibrant blue to a pale sky until it was barely visible at all, a mere ghost of what it once was. And as their divine nature waned, their human appetites grew louder, more demanding. The calm indifference they once held for wealth was replaced by a gnawing, restless avarice. Their contentment was soured by an insatiable, burning ambition. They began to look upon their neighbors not as friends to be respected, but as subjects to be conquered, resources to be plundered. Their immense power, once wielded with the light touch of wisdom, became a heavy-handed weapon of arrogance and greed. They filled their hearts with unjust desires and their minds with lawless, selfish thoughts. To the outside world, they may have appeared more magnificent than ever, their armies stronger, their fleets more numerous, their city more dazzling. But to the gods who could see into the very essence of their souls, they had become corrupted. Their inner beauty, their true strength had faded, and they had become a grotesque, hollow parody of their former noble selves. And so, the great god Zeus, king of all gods, looked down from his celestial throne upon the city of concentric circles, the island of bronze and silver and fiery orichalcum. He saw its glittering facade, but he also saw the darkness that now festered at its heart. He saw that its people, who had been given every blessing, had squandered their divine inheritance. And he decided that a terrible judgment must be passed, a lesson that would echo through the ages. Then, Plato's story arrives at its final, dreadful conclusion. And it happened, he says, with a terrible, shocking swiftness. All of this corruption, all of this pride, was brought to an end in the space of a single, dreadful day and one terrible night. Without warning, the earth itself, the very foundation of their island paradise, began to tremble. A deep, profound shudder ran through the bedrock of the continent, a groan from the center of the world. The great walls of bronze and tin and orichalcum, which had stood unyielding for ages, cracked and groaned like living things in pain. The stone bridges that arched so gracefully over the water buckled and collapsed into the churning canals below. Violent, extraordinary earthquakes shook the city to its very core, toppling temples and palaces as if they were children's toys. And as the land convulsed, the ocean itself seemed to draw a single, immense, terrifying breath, pulling back from the shores, exposing the seabed for miles around, only to return with an unstoppable, cataclysmic force. Immense floods, waves of a size the human mind can barely comprehend, washed over the fertile plains and surged into the city's beautiful, circular waterways. There was no escape. The land and the sea became one, a chaotic, roaring maelstrom of utter destruction. And in that single, terrible day and night, the great island of Atlantis, with all its people, all its wealth, all its power and its glory, was dragged down beneath the waves. It was swallowed by the sea and vanished from the face of the earth forever. Plato's voice falls silent. The story is over. And in that moment, the narrative returns. We are back in the small, quiet room in Athens. The story of the lost city has faded, leaving only a profound silence in its wake. A silence broken only by the soft, steady hiss and sputter of the single oil lamp, its flame still casting those long, gentle shadows on the walls. The air is heavy now, not with sleepiness, but with the weight of the tale that has just been told. The listeners are still lost in thought, their faces illuminated in the soft, golden light. The great journey to a forgotten world has ended right where it began. A story or a warning. You might think, listening to such a story, that the world would have been set ablaze with curiosity. You might imagine that upon hearing Plato's account of a lost golden civilization, philosophers and adventurers alike would have immediately begun to draw maps, to outfit ships, to scan the western horizon for any sign of this sunken empire. One might expect a flurry of activity, a frantic search, a desperate attempt to prove or disprove the tale of a lifetime. But the truth, as is so often the case, is a much quieter affair. The reality is that after Plato told his story, a great and profound silence fell upon Atlantis. Not the silence of the ocean depths that had swallowed it, but the silence of human memory. For centuries, the story slept. Let us drift forward in time, past the age of Plato and his students, into the era of a new power that was rising in the world: the Roman Empire. The Romans were a profoundly practical people. They were builders of roads, aqueducts, and legions. Their genius lay in law, in engineering, in the administration of a vast and sprawling empire. They admired Greek philosophy, and they meticulously copied and preserved the works of Plato, seeing them as essential pillars of education and rhetoric. But to the pragmatic Roman mind, the story of Atlantis was likely viewed as just that, a story, a brilliant piece of philosophical fiction, an allegory about the dangers of hubris, a thought experiment about a perfect state and its inevitable decay. It was a useful tale for teaching morality to young statesmen, but it was not a destination to be found on a nautical chart. They copied the dialogues, the Timaeus and the Critias, but they did not send their galleys sailing past the Pillars of Hercules in search of its ghost. The story of Atlantis was archived, not investigated. It was rolled up in a papyrus scroll, labeled and placed in a vast, silent library in Rome, alongside thousands of other scrolls, a single voice in a chorus of ancient thought. Then, as more centuries passed, even the mighty Roman Empire crumbled. The great libraries were burned or fell into ruin. Countless texts were lost forever, turned to ash and dust. Europe entered a long period of upheaval and forgetting, what some have called the Dark Ages. And in this great intellectual winter, the story of Atlantis could have easily vanished for good. But it did not. It survived, carried like a precious, secret ember through the collapsing world, finding refuge in the most unlikely of places, the quiet, cold stone walls of isolated monasteries. Let us imagine one such place, somewhere in the misty hills of Ireland or the forests of Gaul, 1,000 years after Plato lived. Picture a room, the scriptorium. The air inside is cold, so cold you can almost see your breath. It smells of damp stone, of old wood, and of something else, the dry, sweet, almost vanilla-like scent of aging parchment, and the sharper, earthier smell of oak gall ink. The only light comes from a tall, narrow window, letting in a sliver of weak, gray daylight, and from the flickering flame of a single beeswax candle on a heavy wooden desk. The only sound is the hypnotic, rhythmic scratching of a quill pen against a sheet of vellum. Scratch, scratch, scratch. A sound like a mouse moving through dry leaves. Here, a monk sits hunched over his work. He has been here since before dawn, and he will be here long after the sun has set. His world has been reduced to this single sacred task, to copy by hand the ancient texts. He is creating a perfect replica of Plato's dialogues, a book that might take him years to complete. His fingers are stained with ink, and his back aches from his stooped posture. He works in silence, his lips sometimes moving as he whispers the Greek words to himself before committing them to the page. And as he works, he comes to the passage about Atlantis. He reads of the city of concentric circles, of the walls of bronze and tin and fiery orichalcum, of the terrible day and night of its destruction. But does he gasp in wonder? Does he pause to dream of this lost world? No. To him, this is not a clue to a hidden treasure. It is simply another passage in a long and difficult text. It is an allegory about the punishment that awaits a prideful, pagan society. He might admire the poetry of the language, the power of the imagery, but his primary concern is to copy each letter, each word, with perfect, prayerful accuracy. He dips his quill back into the inkpot, and with a steady hand, he continues his work. Scratch, scratch, scratch. The dramatic, cataclysmic end of a super civilization is reduced to a few careful strokes of ink on a prepared animal skin. And that is how the story of Atlantis survived the long, dark centuries. It did not survive as a piece of history or as a call to adventure. It survived as a lesson. It survived as a ghost in the margins of a philosophical text. It was not dead, but it was sleeping, a single dormant seed buried deep in the cold, fertile soil of Western thought, waiting for over 1,000 years for a new season and a different kind of world to make it grow again. Now, one might wonder why this story, even in the ancient world, did not immediately catch fire. Why did the tale of Atlantis, with all its shimmering grandeur and profound tragedy, fail to inspire an immediate generation of explorers and dreamers? Why were there no frantic expeditions, no obsessive map makers poring over ancient charts? Part of the answer, and perhaps the most significant part, lies not with a nameless monk in a cold, distant monastery, but with a figure who stood in the very center of the Athenian intellectual world, a man whose immense shadow would stretch across the next 2,000 years of Western thought. And ironically, he was Plato's own star pupil, his most brilliant and celebrated student. His name was Aristotle. If Plato was the poet-philosopher, the dreamer who looked upward to a world of perfect forms and eternal, unchanging ideas, then Aristotle was his brilliant, grounded counterpoint. Aristotle was a man who looked down and around. He loved the tangible world, the one he could touch and see and measure. He was, in many ways, the first true scientist. His mind was not naturally drawn to epic tales of sunken continents and divine retribution, but to the intricate, observable, and often messy details of the world right in front of him. He was the kind of man who would spend an entire sun-drenched afternoon meticulously cataloging the different types of shellfish on a beach, noting the subtle variations in their shells. He would patiently observe the life cycle of a frog, from a gelatinous egg to a tadpole, to its final hopping form. He painstakingly collected and classified the political constitutions of 158 different Greek city-states, not to judge them against a perfect ideal, but simply to understand how they worked. His genius was in observation, in categorization, in rigorous step-by-step logic. He was a man who built his understanding of the world from the ground up, piece by verifiable piece. You can almost picture the dynamic between the two men, a scene played out many times in the shade of an olive grove in Athens. The aging master, Plato, sharing his evocative, mythic tale of Atlantis, his eyes perhaps gleaming with the depth of its moral and spiritual meaning, using it as a grand illustration of his most profound ideas. And there, listening intently, respectfully, is the brilliant young student, Aristotle. His mind however, is not soaring with the poetry of it all. It is quietly, methodically deconstructing it. He would have been asking the hard, practical questions. Where is the evidence for this? What are the sources beyond this one second-hand story from a foreign land? How does this account of a continent-sized island sinking in a single day align with what we can observe about the world, about geology, about the slow and gradual processes of history? To Aristotle, an extraordinary claim required extraordinary evidence, and the story of Atlantis, for all its narrative beauty, offered none. It was a single, uncorroborated anecdote passed down through several generations, a piece of hearsay, however profound. And so, it is perhaps not surprising that one of the first and most powerful voices to cast doubt on the literal reality of Atlantis was Aristotle's own. While no definitive text of his survives where he explicitly refutes the story at length, perhaps he felt it didn't warrant such a detailed effort. Later, ancient writers, like the geographer Strabo, attributed a very famous and very cutting dismissal to him. The quote, which has echoed through the centuries, is simple and devastating in its elegant, cold logic. Regarding the tale of Atlantis, Aristotle is believed to have said, "He who invented it also destroyed it." Let those words sink in for a moment. He who invented it also destroyed it. In that one brief, almost surgical sentence, Aristotle performs a cool and complete intellectual demolition. He is, of course, referring to his own teacher, Plato. The meaning is crystal clear. Plato, the masterful writer, the peerless storyteller, fabricated the entire account of Atlantis from whole cloth. He created it as a vehicle for his philosophical ideas, a grand, sweeping parable about the ideal state, the inevitable corruption of power, and the certainty of divine retribution. And once the story had served its literary and philosophical purpose within his dialogues, he simply sunk it at the end. It was a narrative device, nothing more. A brilliant, powerful, and unforgettable fiction. In Aristotle's view, searching for the physical remains of Atlantis on the ocean floor would be as foolish and as pointless as searching for the literal stone foundations of the ideal republic of which Plato wrote, or for the actual physical cave from his famous allegory. This was not the act of a disrespectful student trying to undermine his master. It was the sober assessment of a rigorous scientific mind. And because Aristotle's influence on the subsequent course of history was so immense, for centuries in Europe and the Islamic world, he was known simply as the philosopher. His opinion carried an almost unassailable weight. His cool, logical dismissal acted as a powerful intellectual sedative. If Aristotle, Plato's greatest and most logical student, believed the story was a fiction, then who were later scholars to argue? His verdict helped to frame the entire debate for the next 2 millennia. It ensured that for generations and generations of thinkers, Atlantis remained firmly in the realm of myth and metaphor. It was a beautiful story, a profound allegory, but it was not a place. It was not real. And so, thanks in large part to the pragmatic, evidence-based mind of its inventor's most famous student, the story of Atlantis was put to bed. The great concentric city of bronze and silver and fiery orichalcum did not sink just once beneath the waves of a cataclysmic flood. It sank a second time under the cool, clear, and unyielding weight of Aristotelian logic. And there, in the quiet depths of intellectual disregard, it would sleep for a very, very long time. But no dream, no matter how deeply buried or how logically dismissed, sleeps forever. For more than 1,500 years, the story of Atlantis lay dormant, a quiet footnote in the vast library of classical thought. It was kept alive by the patient, ink-stained hands of scribes and put to rest by the cool, pragmatic logic of philosophers. The world moved on. Great empires rose and then fell into ruin, their own cities becoming the stuff of legend. New languages were born from the ashes of old ones. New faiths spread across the continents, and new kingdoms drew new lines upon the land. The concentric city of fiery orichalcum, the super island that commanded an ocean, seemed destined to remain a philosophical ghost, a mere allegory locked away in the pages of an ancient book. But then, slowly, like the first pale light of dawn, creeping over a dark horizon, a great change began to stir across Europe. It was a change not just of power or of borders, but a change in the very quality of the air, in the way people saw the world and their place within it. A period we now call the Renaissance, a grand and glorious rebirth of art, of science, and, most importantly, of a boundless, ravenous curiosity. Scholars, poets, and princes began to hunger for the lost knowledge of the ancient world. They hunted for forgotten manuscripts, rescued from dusty, cobwebbed monastic libraries, or brought by fleeing scholars from the crumbling Byzantine Empire. And among the priceless treasures they rediscovered and translated were the complete dialogues of Plato. And so, the story of Atlantis was read again. But this time, it was not read by monks in cold, silent scriptoriums, seeing only a lesson in pagan pride. It was read by a new generation of humanist thinkers, by ambitious artists, and by worldly poets in the bustling, sunlit cities of Florence and Venice. To them, it was not just a moral allegory. It was a breathtaking vision of a lost, golden perfection, a world of harmony, beauty, and advanced knowledge that they themselves were striving to recreate in their own time. The story began to breathe again, its ancient lungs filling with the fresh, invigorating air of this new age. And then something happened. An event so momentous, so world-altering, that it would give Plato's ancient tale an astonishing and entirely unforeseen new life. The year was 1492. A determined and famously stubborn Italian navigator named Christopher Columbus, sailing under the Spanish flag, did the unthinkable. He convinced a monarchy to fund a voyage into the void. He sailed west, past the known edges of the world, into the vast, myth-haunted, and terrifying Atlantic, the very ocean that was said to have swallowed Atlantis whole. And he did not fall off the edge of the earth, as so many had feared. He found land. He stumbled upon a new world. Suddenly, Plato's strange and ancient story no longer seemed so fanciful. It felt startlingly, eerily prescient. Let us return to his words for a moment, words that had been dismissed as fantasy for centuries. He had spoken of an island, Atlantis, which served as a gateway to other islands, and beyond them, to a vast continent on the other side of the Atlantic, which walled in the ocean. For centuries, this had been dismissed as pure poetic invention. What continent? There was nothing out there but endless, terrifying water. But now, here it was. Columbus had found it. The existence of the Americas sent a profound shock wave through the European imagination, shaking the very foundations of their geography, their theology, and their history. If Plato had been right about the existence of a great continent on the other side of the ocean, a fact no one in his world could possibly have known for certain, then could he also have been right about the island that lay between? The old, cool dismissal of Aristotle began to seem less certain, perhaps even a little arrogant. The story of Atlantis was no longer just a myth. It was now a tantalizing, almost maddening, geographic possibility. And so, the dream fully awakened. Atlantis escaped from the cloistered pages of philosophy and sailed into the bustling, ink-scented workshops of the map-makers. During this great age of discovery, as brave and foolhardy ships charted new coastlines and filled in the terrifying blank spaces of the globe, the lost island began to appear on their beautiful, handcrafted creations. Not as a solid, certain landmass, but as something more ethereal. A ghost on the map. Imagine a cartographer's studio in 16th century Antwerp or Venice. The room smells of drying paper and linseed oil and the sharp, acidic scent of the chemicals used for etching copper plates. Sunlight streams through a leaded glass window, illuminating a universe of dust motes dancing in the air. On a vast wooden table, a new map of the world is being drawn, its coastlines of Africa and the newly discovered Americas still uncertain, still subject to the latest sailor's contradictory report. And there, in the middle of the vast, empty blue expanse of the Atlantic Ocean, the cartographer now hesitates. He takes up his finest quill, dips it in a thinned, watery blue ink, and with a careful, almost trembling hand, he sketches the faint outline of an island that isn't really there. He might label it Atlantis, or perhaps Insula Atlantis, the island of Atlantis. He draws it not with the firm, confident lines he uses for Spain or for England, but with a delicate, wavering line, as if he is drawing a patch of mist or a reflection on the water, something that might vanish if you look at it too directly. This spectral island appeared on many of the most famous and beautiful maps of the era. It drifted, a cartographic phantom. Sometimes it appeared south of Iceland, other times near the coast of America. It had no fixed coordinates, no certain shape. It was a geographic question mark, a beautiful, speculative placeholder for a lost world. The map makers were not necessarily saying Atlantis is here. They were saying, with their delicate lines and watery ink, perhaps something was here. They were charting not just the known world, but the world of what might have been. The story, after its long, deep sleep, was now fully awake, and it was adrift on the oceans of the world, waiting for someone, someday, to give it a home. As the great age of discovery waned and the age of reason began to dawn, with its emphasis on logic and scientific inquiry, the spectral island of Atlantis found a new and perhaps its most fascinating champion. He was not a navigator charting unknown seas, nor a poet lost in romantic verse. He was a man who was, in some ways, a combination of both and so much more. A man who embodied the transition between the old world of faith and myth and the new world of science. He was a German Jesuit scholar living in the heart of Rome, a true polymath in a time when it was still possible for a single human being to attempt to know everything. His name was Athanasius Kircher. Kircher's mind was a universe unto itself, a magnificent, sprawling, and sometimes chaotic cabinet of curiosities. He was a man fascinated by everything, his intellect roaming freely across all disciplines. He was captivated by the hidden forces of volcanoes and magnets, by the challenge of deciphering ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs, by the strange and beautiful world of microscopic organisms he viewed through a primitive microscope. He was a theorist of music, a designer of strange mechanical contraptions, and an avid collector of all things wondrous. He built one of the first and most famous public museums in the world, the Kircherianum, filled with exotic animals, Roman artifacts, and strange geological formations, a physical manifestation of his boundless curiosity. And in the year 1669, this man of encyclopedic intellect and even more boundless imagination turned his full, formidable attention to the legend of the lost continent, He published a massive, beautifully illustrated book called Mundus Subterraneus, or The Subterranean World, in which he attempted to explain all the hidden workings of the planet Earth, from its fiery core to its highest mountains. And buried within its dense Latin pages, among intricate diagrams of volcanic systems and underground rivers, was a single extraordinary image, a detailed and authoritative-looking map of the island of Atlantis. This was not like the vague, misty outlines that had appeared on the maps of the previous century. Kircher's map was presented not as speculation, but as a work of scholarly, geographical fact. Let us unroll this map in our minds. Imagine the feel of the thick, heavy, linen rag paper, the crisp rustle it makes as it flattens on a great wooden table. It is a copperplate engraving, the lines etched with a confident, scientific precision that speaks of certainty. The ocean is filled with elegant, curling waves, and in the corners, perhaps a decorative compass rose or a mythical sea creature swims through the border, a common flourish of the time. The land masses are labeled with neat, clear Latin script. It looks, for all the world, like a legitimate and serious work of cartography, the product of painstaking research. But as your eyes adjust to the image, you begin to notice something deeply, profoundly strange. Something that feels immediately, intuitively wrong. The map is upside down. Or rather, it is oriented with the south at the top. At what we would consider the bottom of the map, you can clearly see the familiar shapes of Europe and Africa. And at the top of the map, where our modern minds expect to see Canada and the North Pole, you can see the coastline of the Americas. And there, suspended in the middle, filling the vastness of the Atlantic Ocean, is the immense, detailed landmass of Atlantis itself. Its shape is almost like a great, stylized heart or a shield, with a large central mountain range and countless rivers flowing out to the sea. This was not a mistake. Kircher was a meticulous scholar. He did not simply print his map incorrectly. This strange, inverted orientation was a deliberate, brilliant, and deeply symbolic choice. By placing the South at the top, he fundamentally changes our perspective on the world. The Atlantic Ocean is no longer a vast, terrifying barrier separating the old world from the new. Instead, it becomes a central sea, an inland ocean, and Atlantis is no longer a lost island on the periphery of history, but the very heart of the entire world. In his depiction, Atlantis is the literal and figurative bridge that connects the two hemispheres. It is the missing link. The great continent is positioned directly between the coast of Spain and the mouth of the Amazon River, making it the clear and obvious source from which all civilization could have spread, both east and west. And so, Kircher's map is not a work of archaeology. No one had dredged up these coastlines from the ocean floor. It is a work of pure synthesis, of powerful, imaginative interpretation. It is the product of a mind that saw no contradiction between science and myth. Kircher took Plato's text as his foundational historical document. He took the recent discovery of the Americas as geographical confirmation. He took ancient legends of floods and lost gods from cultures all over the world. He took his own cutting-edge theories about geology and subterranean forces, and he poured all of this, history, myth, science, and faith, into this one single compelling image. This is the map of a dream, rendered with the meticulousness of a scientific diagram. The coastlines are drawn with a firm hand. The rivers are named. The central mountain, Mount Atlas, is clearly marked. It is a profound attempt to will a lost world back into existence through sheer force of intellect, scholarship, and unwavering belief. It is a testament to how deeply the story of Atlantis had captured the imagination of even the most learned minds of the age. They wanted it to be true, and in this map, Kircher made it look and feel undeniably true. He gave the ghost a body, the whisper a voice, the dream a location. And so, for a time, this became the definitive image of Atlantis. A beautiful, strange, upside-down map, born not from a sailor's logbook, but from a scholar's labyrinthine mind in a quiet, candlelit study in Rome. A perfect and lasting symbol of the Atlantis legend itself. A compelling, detailed, and beautifully rendered fiction that so expertly blurs the line between what is real and what we desperately wish were real. For 2 more centuries, the dream of Atlantis continued to drift, a fascinating, intellectual curiosity for the learned, a beautiful but unprovable theory. Kircher's strange, inverted map was copied and admired, but the island itself remained where it had always been, in the misty, unreachable realm of myth and speculation. The story, it seemed, was waiting. It needed a new kind of champion, a new kind of voice, not a philosopher debating in an Athenian garden, not a Jesuit scholar in a Roman study, but someone who could take this ancient poetic tale and present it to the modern world, the world of steam engines and telegraphs, as a hard, scientific, historical fact. And in the latter half of the 19th century, in the most unlikely of places, the story of Atlantis finally found its man. He was not a swashbuckling adventurer exploring forgotten jungle ruins, nor was he a salty sea captain poring over ancient, salt-stained charts. He was a politician and a populist orator. From the young, bustling, and decidedly unmythical state of Minnesota in the American Midwest. His name was Ignatius Donnelly. Donnelly was a man of immense, restless energy and wide-ranging, if not always entirely successful, ambitions. He had been a lawyer, a land speculator, a lieutenant governor of his state, and a United States congressman. He was a fiery, passionate speaker, a champion of the common man who fought for the rights of farmers and working people against the powerful railroad barons and bankers of the Gilded Age. But his political career was a tumultuous one, a series of dramatic rises and equally dramatic, frustrating falls. And it was after one of these stinging political defeats, finding himself with an abundance of time on his hands and a restless, hungry mind that refused to be still, that he turned his formidable energy to a new passion, a new obsession. He retreated from the loud, contentious world of politics and into the deep, quiet world of books. Specifically, he retreated into the magnificent, silent reading room of the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C. Imagine him there, in that grand, cavernous space. The air smells of old paper, of countless leather bindings, and of floor polish. The only sounds are the gentle, hypnotic rustle of turning pages and the soft, steady hiss of the gaslights high overhead. Donnelly is no longer the grand orator, the politician seeking votes. He is a man possessed by a single, all-consuming idea. He has read Plato's dialogues, the Timaeus and the Critias, and unlike the centuries of scholars before him who saw a beautiful metaphor, Donnelly saw a literal, historical account, a factual report. He became utterly and unshakably convinced that Atlantis was not only real, but that it was the key, the single master key to understanding all of human history. It was the missing piece of the puzzle, the source, the great mother culture from which all subsequent high civilizations, Egyptian, Mayan, Incan, European, Hindu, had sprung. So he began his great work. Picture him at a vast, dark oak table, completely surrounded by towering, precarious stacks of books that threaten to topple at any moment. Books on geology, on mythology, on the new and exciting field of archaeology, on linguistics. He is a man on a mission, his brow furrowed in intense concentration. He works for hours, for days, for weeks on end, his pen scratching furiously across page after page of paper, filling them with his dense, looping handwriting. He is not just reading. He is connecting. He is drawing invisible lines across disciplines, across continents, across millennia. He is weaving a grand, unified theory of everything. And at the very center of his intricate, world-spanning web sits the lost island of Atlantis. He takes seemingly unrelated facts and finds profound patterns. The great pyramids of Egypt and the stepped pyramids of Peru, separated by an ocean, they must share a common architect, a colonist, a refugee from Atlantis. The prevalence of flood myths in nearly every ancient culture, from the Epic of Gilgamesh in Mesopotamia to the story of Noah in the Bible, to the legends of indigenous American tribes. These are not separate, local myths, he argued. They are the scattered, collective, and traumatic memory of the single great cataclysm that sank Atlantis. The similarities in ancient languages, the shared symbols of the sun and the serpent, the mysterious practice of embalming the dead. For Donnelly, every one of these was another piece of evidence, another breadcrumb on the trail leading back to the same single source. He was not a trained scientist or a professional historian, and so he was not bound by their rigid, cautious rules of evidence. He operated on intuition, on grand speculation, on a passionate, unshakable belief that he had uncovered a secret truth that the closed-minded, orthodox academic world had either missed or willfully ignored. And in the year 1882, he unleashed his grand theory upon the world. He published his masterwork, a book with the grand, authoritative, and definitive title, Atlantis, the Antediluvian World. The book was a sensation. While professional scholars and scientists immediately and almost universally dismissed it as inspired pseudoscience, a brilliant work of fantasy built on flawed logic and wild conjecture, the public was enthralled. Donnelly had a gift. He wrote with the conviction and passion of a preacher and the dramatic, page-turning flair of a novelist. He made the ancient, dusty past feel immediate, exciting, and most of all, connected. He took the philosophical, allegorical story of Plato and transformed it. He turned it into a thrilling historical detective story. And in a world that was grappling with Darwin's new and unsettling theories of evolution and the dizzying, often alienating pace of industrial change, Donnelly's vision of a single, lost, golden age offered a strange kind of comfort. It suggested that all of humanity, despite its apparent differences, was part of one great, sundered family, all children of a forgotten, utopian motherland. The man from Minnesota had, almost single-handedly, made Atlantis real for millions of people. To understand the immense appeal of Donnelly's book, we need to step inside the world he created. It was a world of breathtaking connections, of secret histories, of a single, unifying story that answered 1,000 different questions. For Donnelly, history was not a series of random, disconnected events. It was a diaspora, a great scattering of knowledge and people from a single, brilliant source. His book reads like a lawyer's closing argument, presenting a cascade of evidence, piece by piece, all pointing to one inescapable conclusion: Atlantis. He would ask his readers to consider the Great Pyramids. Look, he would say, at the magnificent colossal pyramids of Giza in Egypt. And now turn your gaze across the vast Atlantic to the jungles of Central America and the high plateaus of Peru. There, you will find the great stepped pyramids of the Maya and the Inca. How is this possible? He would ask. Two completely separate cultures, with no known contact, separated by an impassable ocean, both deciding to build these massive, complex, and astronomically aligned stone structures? To Donnelly, the idea of independent invention was far more unbelievable than his own theory. The answer was simple. The pyramid was not invented twice. It was invented once in Atlantis. And when the great island sank, the fleeing survivors, the colonists, carried this sacred architectural knowledge with them, east to Egypt and west to the Americas. They were echoes of a single, magnificent design. Then he would turn to mythology. He pointed out the astonishing prevalence of flood myths in cultures all over the globe. The story of Noah and his ark in the Hebrew Bible. The tale of Deucalion and Pyrrha in Greek mythology. The epic of Gilgamesh from Mesopotamia, with its hero Utnapishtim building a great boat to survive a deluge sent by the gods. The legends of the Hopi in North America, the stories of the Manu in India, the tales from countless tribes in South America. Are these all separate local fables about local floods? Donnelly thought not. He saw them as the fragmented, half-remembered, and traumatic folk memories of the one true historical event that had scarred the collective consciousness of humanity, the sinking of Atlantis. The stories were different in their details, but their core was the same. A terrible flood, a warning from the gods, and a few righteous survivors who carried the seeds of a new world. His gaze swept across all of human culture, finding connections everywhere. He would ask his readers to look at the practice of mummification, found in both Egypt and parts of Peru. Coincidence? Or shared Atlantean heritage? He would point to the symbol of the cross, found as a sacred symbol in ancient cultures on both sides of the Atlantic, long before the Christian era. The work of Atlantean missionaries, he would suggest. The astonishingly advanced astronomical knowledge of the Maya, their complex calendar, their understanding of celestial cycles. Where did this knowledge come from? It was, he argued, a legacy, a hand-me-down from a far older and wiser civilization. Even agriculture was part of his grand theory. He noted that key crops like cotton, corn, and tobacco were cultivated in the New World, yet the technology of the spinning wheel and the loom were only found in the Old World. How could this be? For Donnelly, the answer was clear. Atlantis had been the great agricultural center, the place where these crops were first domesticated. After the cataclysm, the plants survived in their colonies in the West, while the technology for processing them survived in the colonies to the East. In Donnelly's hands, every mystery of the ancient world became a clue. Every cultural similarity became a piece of evidence. He was like a detective assembling a case, or perhaps more like a poet finding a metaphor that connected everything. His world was neat, it was tidy, and it was deeply romantic. The professional scientists and historians, of course, were appalled. They pointed out that his methods were unscientific, that he ignored vast amounts of evidence that contradicted his theories. and that cultural similarities can arise for many reasons, including independent invention or the basic shared structures of the human mind. They called his work speculation, fantasy, pseudoscience. But the public did not care about the dry dismissals of academics. They loved Donnelly's story. It was a grand, sweeping, and easily understood narrative. It replaced the messy, complicated, and often random story of human history with something far more compelling: a single, epic tale of a lost paradise and its scattered children. It gave the past a sense of mystery, of magic, and of a deep underlying unity. Donnelly's Atlantis was not just a place, it was an explanation. And it was an explanation that people were eager and ready to believe. And so, for decades, the world that Ignatius Donnelly built in his book became, for many, the definitive vision of Atlantis. It was a grand, continent-sized empire in the middle of the Atlantic, a mother culture of immense power and influence. The search for those who believed was focused there, in the deep, dark, and unexplored waters between Europe and the Americas. The ghost of Atlantis had found a home, a fixed address in the popular imagination. But now, let us leave Mr. Donnelly in his gaslit study, surrounded by his towering stacks of books and his grand, all-encompassing theories. Let us allow the image of his Atlantic supercontinent to dissolve, like a mirage on a hot day, and let us allow our awareness to drift once more, across the ocean, across the continent of Europe, back to the sea where our story first began. We are returning to Greece, but not to the mainland city of Athens. We are drifting south over the sparkling, impossibly blue waters of the Aegean Sea, a sea scattered with 1,000 sun-drenched islands, their rocky shores dotted with whitewashed villages and ancient olive groves. We are coming to rest over one particular island, part of a small, circular archipelago. Today, travelers know this place as one of the most beautiful and dramatic islands in the world. They call it Santorini. But in the late 19th century, when Donnelly was dreaming of his lost Atlantic world, this island was known by its older name, Thera. And here, on the southern coast of Thera, something extraordinary was happening, not in the realm of theory or of myth, but in the solid, tangible earth itself. French archaeologists were overseeing a quarrying operation. Local workmen were digging into the soft volcanic rock of the island, mining it for pumice, a lightweight stone needed for the construction of the Suez Canal in Egypt. It was hard, dusty, unremarkable work under the hot Mediterranean sun. But then, one day, a workman's shovel struck something that was not rock. It was the top of a stone wall. And then another. And then, as they dug deeper, they found the remains of a house. its rooms still intact. They had stumbled upon something incredible, a settlement, a town, an entire city that no one knew existed, a city that had been completely and perfectly buried, not by water, but by a thick, heavy blanket of white and gray volcanic ash. Let the scene form in your mind. Imagine the bright, almost blinding Greek sunlight. Feel the warmth of the sun on your skin and the gentle, salty breeze coming in off the sea. And now, hear the sounds. The rhythmic scrape of shovels against the soft, ashy soil. The soft whisking of brushes as archaeologists gently clear away centuries of debris from a painted pot. The low murmur of voices speaking in French and Greek, a hushed tone of excitement and reverence. They are not just digging, they are unwrapping a secret. They are peeling back the layers of time itself. As they dug deeper, day after day, week after week, the scale of what they had found became clear. This was not a small village. This was a sophisticated, prosperous Bronze Age city, preserved in a state of arrested development, like a photograph of a moment that had been abruptly frozen. They uncovered multi-story buildings, their stone walls still standing. They found paved streets and squares and an elaborate system of clay pipes for water and sanitation. Inside the houses, they found things just as they had been left on the day of the disaster, 3,500 years ago. They found large pottery jars called pithoi, some still containing the traces of olive oil or wine. They found bronze tools, stone lamps, and delicate painted ceramics. It was as if the inhabitants had simply vanished, leaving their entire world behind. And the most breathtaking discovery of all was on the walls. As the archaeologists carefully cleaned the plaster walls of the houses, vibrant, beautiful paintings began to emerge from their long, dark sleep. These were not the stiff, formal paintings of Egypt or the warlike scenes of the Mycenaeans. These were paintings brimming with life and color and a sense of joyful peace. There were paintings of blue monkeys climbing on rocks, of graceful antelopes, of young boys boxing, and most famously, a stunning, continuous frieze showing a great procession of ships sailing on a deep blue sea, escorted by leaping dolphins. This was the lost city we now call Akrotiri, a city that had disappeared from history, so completely buried that even the ancient Greeks, including Plato himself, seem to have had no knowledge of it. It was a time capsule, a real-life Pompeii, but 1,000 years older. And as the archaeologists worked, uncovering this ghost city from its volcanic tomb, a new and powerful question began to form in the minds of some scholars. While Ignatius Donnelly was looking for a lost continent in the Atlantic based on a single ancient story, here, in Plato's own backyard, was a real, highly advanced island civilization. a true seafaring power that had been utterly destroyed and wiped off the map in a sudden, cataclysmic volcanic eruption. The parallels were impossible to ignore. Could this be it? Could the story of Atlantis not be a myth from a distant ocean, but a distant, distorted memory of a real catastrophe that happened right here in the Aegean Sea? The whisper of Atlantis, it seemed, was beginning to echo from a new and very real place. The city unearthed at Akrotiri was not an isolated outpost. It was a vital and prosperous port town, a jewel in the crown of a much larger and even more magnificent civilization. This was the world of the Minoans, named after the legendary King Minos of Crete. The Minoan civilization flourished during the Bronze Age, reaching its peak in the centuries just before the city of Akrotiri was buried. They were the first great complex civilization to arise in Europe, and in many ways, they were unlike any who came after them. To understand the Minoans is to understand a people who lived in profound harmony with the sea. Their home was the great island of Crete, a long, mountainous island that sits like a guardian at the southern edge of the Aegean. But their influence, their culture, and their ships reached every corner of this sea, from the Greek mainland to the coast of Asia Minor. They were not a land-based military power like the later Spartans or Romans. They were a thalassocracy, an empire of the sea. Their power did not come from legions and phalanxes, but from their elegant, swift ships, which dominated the trade routes, carrying copper and tin, olive oil and wine, and exquisite pottery throughout the known world. Let us try to picture their world. Imagine standing on a Cretan hillside, looking out over the deep blue sea. The air is warm, scented with wild herbs and the salty spray of the ocean. Below you, nestled in a valley, is not a fortified city, but a sprawling, complex structure that seems more like a grand country estate than a royal capital. This is a Minoan palace, like the great one at Knossos. And the first thing you would notice is what is missing. There are no massive defensive walls, no intimidating battlements or watchtowers. The palace is open, airy, and inviting. This was a civilization that felt so secure in its mastery of the sea, so confident in its naval power, that it did not feel the need to hide behind stone fortifications. Their walls were the waves, and their soldiers were their sailors. This speaks of a long period of peace and prosperity, a golden age where the greatest concerns were not war and conquest, but trade, art, and religion. And what a vibrant art it was! The Minoans filled their palaces and their homes with beautiful frescoes, paintings of such life and movement that they seemed to almost dance on the walls. Stepping into a Minoan room would be like stepping into a dream of the natural world. On the walls, you would not see great kings smiting their enemies or grim processions of warriors. Instead, you would see great playful dolphins leaping from a swirling, stylized sea. You would see graceful, long-limbed octopuses extending their tentacles in a beautiful, flowing ballet. You would see colorful birds flitting through papyrus reeds and proud griffins with the bodies of lions and the heads of eagles guarding a throne room not with menace, but with a kind of serene, mythical dignity. Their art celebrated life and ceremony and a deep connection to nature. They painted elegant women with elaborate hairstyles and beautifully decorated dresses, their arms adorned with bracelets, engaged in quiet conversation or sacred rituals. They painted scenes of religious festivals, of processions carrying offerings to a goddess. And most famously, they painted the astonishing and dangerous ritual of bull leaping. Young men and women, athletes of incredible grace and courage, are shown somersaulting over the back of a charging bull, a dance with death that was likely a central part of their religious life. The art of the Minoans is the art of a people who were confident, joyful, and deeply in love with the beauty of their world. They were also a people of great sophistication. Their palaces were labyrinthine structures with hundreds of rooms connected by corridors and staircases built around a great central courtyard. They had advanced plumbing, with terracotta pipes providing running water and sanitation systems that would not be seen again in Europe for more than 1,000 years. They developed their own unique writing systems, a hieroglyphic script and a linear script we call Linear A. Frustratingly, we have never been able to decipher Linear A. Their language, their prayers, their histories remain a secret, locked away behind these elegant, mysterious symbols. Their voices are silent. We can see the world they lived in, but we cannot hear what they had to say about it. This was the world that flourished on Crete and Thera, a world of peaceful sea traders, of joyful artists, of sophisticated engineers. A kingdom protected by the sea, rich from trade, and devoted to the celebration of life. A civilization that seemed, for a time, to have found a perfect balance. It was, in its own way, a kind of paradise, a real historical paradise, built not in the middle of the Atlantic, but right here in the heart of the ancient Aegean. A paradise that was living on borrowed time, unknowingly sleeping in the shadow of a colossal, slumbering volcano. This peaceful, sea-kissed world of the Minoans, with its joyful art and its open-hearted palaces, was not destined to last. Beneath the very island of Thera, the beautiful and prosperous home of the city of Akrotiri, a power far greater than any human empire was stirring. A geological force of unimaginable scale. The island of Thera was not just an island. It was the peak of a massive, active volcano, slumbering for centuries beneath the blue Aegean waters. And sometime around the year 1600 BCE, that volcano awoke. We cannot know for certain what warnings the people of Akrotiri received. Perhaps there were tremors, small earthquakes that rattled the pottery on their shelves. Perhaps smoke and steam began to vent from the mountain at the center of their island. Something warned them. We know this because in the immaculately preserved city, archaeologists have found no human remains. No skeletons huddled in corners like those in Pompeii. It seems the entire population, sensing the impending doom, gathered what they could and evacuated the island, fleeing in their ships, hoping to find refuge on Crete or other nearby shores. They left their homes and all their worldly goods behind, perhaps believing they would one day return. They would not. The eruption that followed was one of the most violent and cataclysmic events in all of recorded human history. Geologists today estimate that it was many times more powerful than the eruption of Krakatoa in the 19th century. The very heart of the island of Thera was blown apart, vaporized in an instant. A colossal column of ash, rock, and gas was blasted miles into the stratosphere, so high that it blocked out the sun. The sound of the explosion would have been deafening, a roar heard hundreds, perhaps thousands, of miles away. The island that was once whole was shattered, collapsing in on itself, leaving behind the great sea-filled caldera that we see today as the Bay of Santorini. The city of Akrotiri, already abandoned, was entombed. A thick, heavy blanket of white pumice and gray ash rained down from the darkened sky, covering the streets, filling the houses, and preserving the city in a silent, ghostly tomb for the next 3,500 years. But the destruction did not end there. The collapse of the volcano into the sea created a series of immense tsunamis. Waves of unimaginable height and power radiated outwards across the Aegean. These colossal walls of water would have slammed into the northern coast of Crete, the heartland of the Minoan civilization just 70 miles to the south. The waves would have obliterated the coastal towns, destroyed the Minoan fleet at anchor in their harbors, and surged miles inland, poisoning the fertile farmland with salt. For a civilization whose lifeblood was the sea, this was a devastating, crippling blow. And for days, perhaps even weeks, the world was plunged into a strange twilight. The sky was dark, choked with the fine volcanic ash that circled the globe. This ash would have fallen like a fine gray snow across the entire eastern Mediterranean, burying crops, sickening livestock, and creating a period of climate chaos, a volcanic winter that would have led to widespread famine. The Minoan civilization, already crippled by the tsunami, was now starved. Their trade routes were disrupted. Their navy was destroyed. Their farms were barren. Their joyful, peaceful, and prosperous world was brought to a sudden and brutal end. They did not disappear overnight. But the great eruption of Thera was the beginning of their final decline. Within a few generations, their unique culture had faded, absorbed by the more warlike Mycenaeans from the Greek mainland. Their palaces were abandoned, their language was forgotten, and their beautiful, vibrant world slipped into the mists of legend. And here, in this great and real tragedy, the whisper of our other story returns. Let us go back for a moment to Plato's account, an account he claimed came from the ancient Egyptians. What did he describe? A mighty and advanced island kingdom, a great sea power, destroyed in a single day and night by violent earthquakes and floods, a civilization that vanished beneath the sea, leaving a memory of a golden age. Now, think of the Minoans, a mighty and advanced island civilization, a great sea power whose heartland was devastated by a cataclysm caused by a volcano and its resulting tsunamis, a civilization that effectively vanished from history. Could this be the true source of the legend? A real historical catastrophe of such immense proportions that the memory of it was passed down, generation by generation, for over 1,000 years? A story that traveled from Minoan refugees to the shores of Egypt, where it was recorded by their patient, long-memoried priests. A story that was then told, centuries later, to the Greek lawmaker Solon, who in turn told it to his family until at last it reached the ears of his descendant, Plato. Perhaps in the telling and retelling, the details were changed. The location was moved from the Aegean to the vast, more mysterious Atlantic. The name was changed. The timeline was exaggerated. This is how memory works. This is how history becomes myth. The similarities are simply too striking, too profound to be easily dismissed. It feels, more than any other theory, like a plausible truth. A sad, beautiful, and deeply human truth. The ghost of Atlantis, it seems, may not have been a ghost at all. It may have been the very real and very tragic shadow of Minoan Crete. The theory of the Minoan catastrophe is a powerful one. It is elegant. It is backed by archaeological evidence, and it feels, in many ways, like a satisfying and poetic solution to this ancient riddle. For many historians and archaeologists, the story ends there, in the ash-covered ruins of Akrotiri and the shattered coast of Crete. And yet, the dream of an Atlantic continent did not die. The vision of Ignatius Donnelly and of the mapmakers before him was too powerful, too romantic, to be simply replaced by a volcano in the Aegean. The name itself, Atlantis, the Atlantic, still held its magic. And so, the search continues. But today, the search for Atlantis looks very different. The tools are no longer ancient texts and speculative maps. They are machines, machines of incredible sophistication, designed to probe the deepest and darkest places on our planet. Let us leave the sunlit shores of the Greek islands behind. Let us sink down, down, down into the cold, crushing darkness of the deep Atlantic Ocean. Imagine you are no longer a disembodied observer in a quiet room, but a passenger, safe inside the protective sphere of a deep-sea submersible, a small, sturdy vessel built to withstand pressures that would crumple steel like paper. Outside your small, thick porthole, there is nothing to see. Not the sparkling blue of the surface, but a profound and absolute blackness. A blackness more complete than any night you have ever known. There is no up, no down, just a slow, weightless descent into the abyss. Inside the submersible, the air is recycled, and the only sounds are the quiet hums and whirs of the life support systems. A low, gentle hum from the electronics, the soft, rhythmic sound of a ventilation fan, and another sound, the most persistent of all. Ping. It is the sound of the sonar system, the vessel's eyes in this sightless world, a pulse of sound sent out into the darkness. Ping. You wait as the sound travels out, strikes the ocean floor thousands of feet below, and then echoes back. And from that echo, a picture is slowly, methodically being drawn on a glowing screen in front of you. Not a picture of light and shadow, but a map of contours, of depths, of the very shape of the hidden world beneath. Ping. Now, the submersible's powerful external lights are switched on. Two brilliant beams of white light cut through the blackness, illuminating a small circle of the world outside your window. The light doesn't travel far in this dense water. It seems to be swallowed by the darkness just a few dozen feet away. And what you see in that circle of light is a landscape of profound and desolate monotony. The ocean floor, a vast, flat, seemingly endless desert of fine, silty mud. It is a soft, brownish-gray color, and it has been sitting here undisturbed for millennia. Occasionally, a strange, ghostly creature might drift through the beams of light. A translucent jellyfish with long, trailing tentacles, or a deep-sea fish with bioluminescent spots of its own. But mostly, there is nothing. Just the mud, the silence, and the immense, crushing weight of the 2 miles of water above you. The submersible moves slowly, methodically, back and forth, like someone mowing a vast, invisible lawn. It is a painstaking process, mapping this hidden landscape inch by inch. Ping. The sonar paints another line on the screen. The lights scan another patch of empty seabed. This is the modern search for Atlantis. It is not a thrilling adventure. It is a slow, patient, and often deeply monotonous process. It is a search for an anomaly, a right angle, a straight line. Anything that suggests the work of human hands in a world that should only be shaped by the slow, gentle currents of the abyss and the drift of sediment over eons. Ping. The sound is constant. It is hypnotic. It is the sound of searching, the sound of hope, sent out into an immense and seemingly empty silence. A modern whisper looking for an ancient one. For hours, for days, the search continues in this slow, methodical rhythm. The submersible drifts through the crushing dark, and the sonar continues its steady, lonely pulse. Ping. The screen paints another line of the seabed, another patch of endless, featureless mud. Ping. Another sweep, more of the same. The mind begins to drift. The eyes grow heavy, lulled by the monotony, by the gentle hum of the machine, by the vast, empty silence outside the thick glass. And then, just as sleep begins to take hold, something different appears on the screen. A flicker of interest in the control room. The sonar has picked up an anomaly, an unexpected shape. The submersible is guided closer, its lights cutting through the darkness, searching. And there, on the seabed, is a series of long, parallel lines. For a fleeting, hopeful moment, they look like the foundations of a massive wall, or the remnants of a great submerged road. Could this be it? A jolt of excitement, a quickening of the pulse. This could be the edge of a city, a clue, a real physical trace. But as the submersible gets closer, as the high-resolution cameras zoom in, the hope begins to fade. The beautiful, straight lines resolve into something else, a natural rock formation, a series of basalt columns formed by cooling lava eons ago, fractured by geological pressures into a pattern that, from a distance, mimicked the work of human hands. It is just a trick of the light, a geological coincidence. The excitement subsides, and the slow, patient search resumes. The hope dissolves back into the quiet monotony of the deep. Ping. This is the pattern of the modern search. It is a cycle of hope and gentle disappointment. Over the decades, sonar has mapped vast stretches of the Atlantic floor, and time again, these false echoes have appeared, only to be explained away by the patient work of geologists. Strange circular formations on the mid-Atlantic ridge are identified as the calderas of extinct underwater volcanoes. A mysterious, grid-like pattern found off the coast of Spain turns out to be the result of cross-hatching from previous sonar surveys. A digital ghost, a map of the search itself, rather than the thing being searched for. Ping. And the clues are not just found in the deep ocean. Closer to the surface, in the warm, clear, turquoise waters of the Bahamas, lies one of the most famous and persistent of these false promises. It is called the Bimini Road. It is a remarkable half-mile-long underwater feature composed of lusty, rectangular limestone blocks neatly arranged in two parallel lines. To the naked eye, it looks unquestionably man-made. It looks like a great submerged earth pavement or the foundation of a massive pier. For decades, believers have claimed that this is a genuine remnant of Atlantis, a road that once led to a great coastal city. Explorers have dived on it, photographed it, and written countless books about it. It became a point of pilgrimage for those who wanted to believe. But the cool, patient work of science has told a different and quieter story. Geologists have studied the blocks, taken core samples, and analyzed the patterns. And the overwhelming consensus is that the Bimini Road is a natural phenomenon. It is a form of beach rock, limestone that formed at the shoreline, and, through a unique process of fracturing and erosion, broke into these remarkably geometric, block-like shapes. The ocean, it seems, is a very clever artist. It is very good at creating patterns that look like our own, and so it goes. A strange magnetic anomaly detected near the Azores, a peculiar underwater mound found near the Canary Islands. Each one brings a brief flurry of excitement, a new book, a new documentary, a new theory, and each one, upon closer scientific inspection, resolves back into the quiet, mundane reality of geology. The ocean is full of these illusions, these beautiful, tempting mirages. It is a vast repository of false echoes and empty promises. Ping. The submersible continues its journey. The sonar continues its lonely, hypnotic call. The great search goes on, a testament to the enduring power of a dream, but the deep, dark water offers up no secrets, only more questions and more silence. And so, as the slow, patient, and methodical search of science continues to find only deep-sea mud and natural rock formations, something else begins to happen. When the physical world offers no answers, the human imagination, which is a place of boundless energy and infinite possibility, takes flight. The story of Atlantis begins to slip its ancient moorings once again. It escapes the careful hands of the historians, the geologists, and the archaeologists. It drifts away from Plato's original text and becomes something else entirely. It becomes a blank canvas, a vast, empty space where anyone can paint their own vision of a lost paradise. And the visions that have been painted are wonderful and strange and beautiful. As the sonar probes the depths of the Atlantic and finds nothing, some begin to wonder if they are searching in the wrong ocean or even on the wrong continent. A new and intriguing theory emerges. It suggests that perhaps Plato's story was fundamentally misinterpreted. Perhaps, it posits, the Earth's crust shifted dramatically in the distant past. And so, the search moves to a place of ultimate isolation and mystery, Antarctica. The theory goes that Antarctica was not always a continent of ice. Millennia ago, it was a temperate land, teeming with life, and it was here that the great civilization of Atlantis flourished. And then a sudden pole shift, a catastrophic change in the Earth's axis, plunged the continent into a deep freeze, burying the concentric city not under water, but under 2 miles of solid ice. The story is compelling. It has a certain scientific flavor, and it explains why no ruins have ever been found. They are simply locked away in the coldest and most inaccessible place on Earth, waiting for the ice to melt and reveal their secrets. But other dreamers look not to the frozen poles, but to the stars. They look at the sheer sophistication described by Plato, the advanced engineering, the metallurgy, the harmonious society, and they find it difficult to believe that such a civilization could have simply arisen on its own. And so, a different kind of story is born. In this version, the Atlanteans were not entirely human. They were a colony, a settlement founded by visitors from another world, perhaps from the Pleiades or from a distant galaxy. They were extraterrestrials who brought their advanced knowledge to our primitive planet, building their magnificent city as a kind of outpost or beacon. And in this telling, the city of Atlantis did not sink beneath the waves in a primitive, geological catastrophe. No, its end was far more dramatic and far more technological. When their time on Earth was done, or when disaster loomed, they did not flee in ships. They simply left. Their great city, perhaps a massive starship all along, lifted off from the ocean floor, broke through the surface of the water, and ascended into the heavens, returning to the star system from which it came, leaving only a legend and a great empty space in the ocean behind. And then there are the quietest and most personal searches of all. These are the journeys that require no ships, no sonar, no complex theories. They take place in the inner world, in the realm of spirit and intuition. There are those who believe that Atlantis was not just a physical place, but a spiritual one. A civilization that operated on a higher frequency with a more enlightened consciousness. And they believe that while the physical city is gone, its energy, its memory, its Akashic record still exists. And so, through meditation, through dreams, through the quiet work of psychics and mystics, they attempt to connect with this lost world. They speak of seeing visions of great shimmering crystal towers, of hearing the ethereal music of the Atlanteans, of communicating with the spirits of their ancient priests and priestesses. For these searchers, Atlantis is not a ruin to be found, but a state of being to be achieved, a memory not to be excavated from the earth, but to be awakened within the soul. From the South Pole to the Pleiades, from a sunken city to a spiritual plane. The story has grown far beyond the quiet, lamp-lit room in Athens where it was first told. It has become a vessel for all our modern hopes and our modern anxieties. It has been adopted by secret societies, by New Age philosophers, by novelists and filmmakers. It has become a powerful and enduring modern myth. It is as if the original story, so simple and so profound, was a single, perfect seed. And once it was planted in the fertile soil of the human imagination, it grew into a great, sprawling, and fantastical tree with 1,000 different branches, each one reaching for a different sky. The story no longer belongs to Plato. It belongs to everyone. And it has become a perfect mirror, reflecting back at us our own deepest longings for a lost paradise, a secret history, and a world more magical than our own. And so, our long and winding journey comes to a gentle end. We have traveled from a lamp-lit room in ancient Athens to the quiet scriptoriums of the Middle Ages. We have stood in a scholar's study in Rome, gazing at an upside-down map, and in a grand library in Washington, feeling the passionate conviction of a man from Minnesota. We have felt the warm sun on a Greek island, and we have descended into the cold, crushing darkness of the deep Atlantic. We have followed the story of Atlantis as it has changed and transformed from a philosophical warning to a geographical possibility, and finally into a boundless modern myth. And after all of this, the lost city remains just that, lost. No definitive proof has ever been found. No golden gate has ever been dredged from the sea. No fiery orichalcum has ever been unearthed. The city of concentric circles remains as elusive today as it was in Plato's time. A beautiful, haunting, and persistent ghost. And so, perhaps, we arrive at the final and most important question. A question that is not for the historians or the archaeologists to answer, but for the quiet of our own hearts. After all of this searching, after all of these theories, perhaps the essential question is not, where is Atlantis? But rather, why do we keep looking for it? Why does this one story, out of thousands of ancient tales, hold such a powerful and enduring grip on our imagination? Why do we so desperately want it to be true? Perhaps the answer is that the search for Atlantis has never really been about a physical place on a map. Perhaps we are not really searching for a sunken continent beneath the waves. Perhaps we are searching for something within ourselves. The story of Atlantis speaks to a deep and profound human longing, a longing for a lost golden age, a nostalgic ache for a time when the world was younger, more magical, and more perfect. It is the hope that somewhere in our distant past, we, as a species, were better, wiser, more harmonious, more in tune with nature and with the divine. The lost city of Atlantis is not a destination. It is an idea. It is the idea of perfection, of a paradise that was once held and then, through our own human folly, was lost. And the search for it is the search for that lost part of ourselves. The belief that if we could just find those ruins, if we could just prove it was real, then maybe, just maybe, we could find our way back to that state of grace. Atlantis is not a place to be found on a map. It is a longing, a beautiful, and perhaps a necessary dream. And now, as our journey concludes, it is time to let the story go. It is time to let all the questions, all the theories, all the images simply drift away. Let them dissolve into the quiet of the night. Let the gentle waves of this story now become the waves that rock you into a deep and peaceful sleep. Let the images of the concentric city, the gleaming walls of bronze and silver, the quiet lamp-lit room in Athens, and the deep silent abyss of the ocean, let them all merge and soften, becoming the strange and beautiful landscape of your own personal dream world. There is nothing more to search for. There is nothing more to think about. The story is told. The day is done. All that is left is this moment of perfect stillness, this quiet harbor of rest. You can feel your body growing heavier, more relaxed. You can feel your mind becoming calm and clear and quiet. You are safe, you are comfortable, and you are drifting peacefully and easily towards sleep. Perhaps tonight, in your own dreams, you will find your own Atlantis, a place of peace, a place of rest, a golden age of perfect slumber. Thank you for joining me on this journey into the hazy past. I hope it has brought you some measure of peace, and I hope you sleep deeply and soundly until the morning light. Good night. Sleep well.